All right, welcome to another episode of I Care About Books. And I am very excited. I mean, I'm always joined by Graham, which is great, but I'm also joined tonight by Vince from Book Notification. And you know Vince because he's got his own podcast that he promotes a variety of books every single week. So Vince, very cool to have you here, the entertainment editor for Book Notification. And I love that you jumped on board so quickly to read Erasure by Percival Everett. And we're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to read it and we're going to jump on the podcast. So welcome, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Yeah, doing great. It was an easy read. I had no problem doing it and glad to be here.
Okay, so I'm glad you started off with that because, so yes, tonight we are discussing Erasure by Percival Everett. And I've got to just, for starters, say that I owe a huge apology to my public library for repeatedly checking out this book, like having to renew my loans, because it took me a while to actually get through the book. I found it to be really dense. When I finally had the time crunch and I had to sit down and get through it, I did. But it's a hard read. Would you guys agree to that?
I wouldn't actually. I have a bad memory, so I try and read the books as close to the podcast as possible. And my wife was stressing because I hadn't even read it until this morning. Actually, lunchtime I started. I finished it in like 3.5 hours, and I couldn't put it down. It wasn't one of those books where I was hooked on it. I found it very easy to read, and I loved it.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, that I finished it quickly once I finally sunk my teeth into it, but I found it to be a hard read in terms of the material that we were absorbing. What do you think, Vince?
Yeah, I have a weird experience with this book because last year it was adapted into a movie, American Fiction, and I watched that movie and I had no idea it was a book.
Oh,
so there's nothing that really caught me off guard reading it. But there was parts, like there's a part in this book where he reads a paper and they just put the paper in the book. And that was like where I was like skimming because I think it was purposefully hard to read, like purposefully, like professory language and theories and things like that. Like, because you're supposed to think when this guy writes his own stuff, he's got his head very far up a place. I think is what you're supposed to think.
Graham, since you just read the book this morning, why don't you do the synopsis? Tell us about Erasure.
Oof. Well, I'm so bad with synopses. You would think, being this is my life, describing books and all that, I would be good at it. I am not. That's why you guys write the news posts and describe all the books, because I am not. It's about an author who he's a Black author, and he gets sick of the fact that the publishing world is basically relying on stereotypes. So he decides to, in particular with one book where it uses all this African-American slang and stuff, and it becomes really popular. And
it's called We Lives in the Ghetto.
Thank you, yes. And so he decides to go out and write his own completely over-the-top satirical novel, just crazy, with so much over-the-top ridiculous stereotypes, and it ends up becoming a roaring success where, like, his publisher, his editor sends it to his agent, sends it to a publishing company. They love it. It becomes huge, and he's struggling to deal with the fact that, that this satire novel is becoming extremely popular.
And more popular than his previous works. And
By
I think
lot,
that
yes.
was the juxtaposition for him, was that he had, been educated and, studied English and was a professor and was putting out works that he felt had merit. But once he leaned into stereotypes, then suddenly his work was been found of value. And he struggles so much with that, with his identity and how he was writing and his career and so on. What would you say to that, Vince?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, best ways to understand Monk, that's a character, is he goes to like a Borders books, and he hates Borders because it's not a mom and pop, it's a chain. But then he wants to look for his book, and his book is about like Greek poets or something like that, but it's in the African American Studies section, and it's just because the picture on the back is a
Right.
black guy. So, he's not writing about the black experience. He's not writing about being black. He's just writing, but like that's where his book ends up.
He still ends up becoming racially profiled,
Right.
regardless of the material that he's writing
Right.
about.
Yeah, he's not considered an author, even though he's considered a black author, even though even though he just wants to be an author and write about whatever he wants to write about.
Right,
Like-
right. And that was really the interesting part that I found about the book as well, is because, we're listening to Thelonious' story and who he is as a person and his family life and so on and so forth. And there's this big focus on his career, but there is such a heavy story going on the other side about his family, about his relationships, about his father and his mother and his brother and sister as well. And each of those characters fleshed out on their own were a lot to take in for their own particular stories. And without getting into too many spoilers, we learn very quickly in the beginning of the book that Thelonious' father has passed away. He's now helping his aging mother, and the responsibility is falling on his shoulders. And that becomes a very jarring part of the story. So while he's trying to focus on his own career, he's now saddled with all of this responsibility from his family life that he maybe wasn't anticipating when you start reading the book.
Well, first I would say don't worry about spoilers. If people haven't read the book, stop listening to this podcast.
That's fair.
Read the book. It's great, and then you can come on and disagree with us, agree with us, and so on. But yes, I thought the entire family life was great. It added so much emotional depth to the book, to the character, and you're right, the way he created those characters, you felt like they were you relate to them, the family and so on, everything he was going through. And even though it was a lot of emotional, and especially with his mother, depressing stuff, it was also very heartwarming, the stories of him with his father who had committed suicide, just all the little memories of childhood and growing up and everything. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Vince?
Yeah, his there are stories like that, but he does have some like unresolved anger for his dad, probably, for especially how he lost him. And then he just has just complicated feelings about all his siblings, because the parents like kept him apart from his siblings, and then the parents treated him different, and then the mom like losing her sense of self helps him to lose it, because by the end of the book, the family that we meet is not together as much. I'm trying not to be too spoilery, but
Are we allowed to get into spoilers here, Graham? Should we get just like spoiler alert?
Let's
You haven't
spoil.
read it?
His dad actually had an affair with a woman and had another kid. Everything. He wins a book award at the end. There you go. Let's spoil it all.
right. Yeah.
It's like if you haven't read this book, don't be watching this podcast.
I thought what was interesting for me while I was reading it, because, Vince, I think you hit the nail on the head there, talking about his sort of distance from his siblings. But that seems to be the going theme throughout the entire book, is that Thelonious never seems to have a real relationship with anybody. He always has sort of a peripheral relationship. So he has a very deep respect for his father from a peripheral advantage point. He allowed his sister Lisa to look after his mother until Lisa was murdered, and then suddenly he had to, and now he's starting to see things like he never did before. It was always a peripheral way. So he had his own feelings about his brother Bill and what maybe Bill was doing in his private life, but Thelonious never allowed himself to get close enough. But I wager he's also like that in his career. He never feels, you know what I mean? He always seems sort of peripheral to everything that's sort of going on. And that comes out when he writes this book using all of these racial stereotypes. He's still so distanced and nuanced. He's never really gotten close to anybody. And it goes along with all the other characters in the book that we continuously meet. The woman at the boathouse, the woman from the conference center that he ends up just sort of randomly sleeping with, the friends that he keeps. Everybody is sort of always at a distance. including himself.
Yeah, I do think there might be some. I mean, like he's probably a genius, like writer. He's very smart, but there's also like some neurodivergent tendencies with him, where
Sure.
he just like doesn't understand how to talk to people in a way, or
Mhm.
like he just says like when he meets his distant sister, it's just like, okay, bye forever, and it's not. I don't think it would necessarily be that way, but I haven't been in that situation, so I couldn't tell you. But yeah, he acts a lot. He's acting a lot,
Yeah.
which is why he's able to step into like the new character, but then he just totally loses the old one. He starts to lose track of the old one, which is where he starts kind of go off the rails at the end.
Yeah, he keeps like developing these new personas, and then one takes form in a way that he wasn't anticipating. Which, so we should explain what we're trying to say about this book that he's written. So, Graham, do you want to get into that a little bit about the book that Thelonious ends up writing that we actually get a big copy of in the middle of the book?
Yeah, that was quite a surprise. Like I remember Angela said that on the last podcast when she was mentioning the book. It's like a novel inside a novel, and that's what it is. It's a book completely racial stereotype all over the board, like just incredibly over the top, and it's kind of what it says, a mockery of the whole system, basically the whole stereotypical system, and it takes up a large portion of the book. I think it takes up about 35%, I believe. Like it takes
It's
up
a
a
lot.
big portion. Yeah. So that was interesting. I actually found an issue with it, not an issue really per se, but I'm wondering if this goes deeper because with him becoming that character, the main character in that story was a stag, and later on in the book, it does feel like, yeah, the stag persona is taken over a bit, I guess. But I actually found it was very odd. I found after I read that short story or the novel, and then it went back to Monk again. I kept struggling to decipher between the two. Like when Monk was narrating, I kept thinking it was Stag, So I actually found it took a good portion of the book for me to actually differentiate the two protagonists, the one from the actual book and then the one from the novel that he wrote, the satire novel.
So, Vince, what did you think of the book?
Like the book is brutal for the sake of being brutal. A lot of the
So just to
choices.
jump in here, we're talking about the book that Monk has written that
Yeah,
we
it's called-
read inside the book. We're talking about the book inside the
My
book.
Pathology,
Yes.
or later, which is later changed to Fuck. When he first writes, it's called My Pathology.
I like the second title better.
Yeah. And that was just him pushing to see if he could get away with it. And there's also a thing where their housekeeper like hated his books because he used the F word in them, or at least that's what he thought. But anyway, I think the interesting thing about My Pathology or Fuck is that there are times in the book where he's just trying to, use really, for lack of a better word, like ghetto language, do the most brutal things, like sexually assault women and things like that, which without a care, and do crimes. He's very Monk's doing that like on purpose to be as brutal as possible. But then there's parts where he just can't help himself, and like good writing comes through it, and even in a way some of his own pathology comes through.
Yeah.
I think.
And that's what I found to be the most interesting part about My Pathology is that the whole story leading up to Monk writing this book is that he talks about how he has no idea what he's talking about. That he doesn't, he's literally writing fiction in his mind because he has no idea, the experiences that he claims to be writing about in first person.
Yeah, he talks about that a bit later in the book too, where he mentions how back when he was younger, all the language they would use, and it just never felt right to him, So that's where you have that interesting layer where he isn't just turning the stereotypes up by 100. He's actually writing stuff that, yeah, he also doesn't know about. His complaints about that female author who wrote the initial book, like, he's doing the exact same thing, basically. Now, he's doing it as a satire, but it is that thing where he's writing about language, etc., that he never really grew up with or was too familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it becomes like a characterization. Like the whole novel is a caricature simply because the author writing it wrote it from a disingenuous place. You know, he didn't write about real experiences. He wrote about what his perception was in the terms of pushing all the boundaries that were possible. It was a very big chunk of the book. And actually, you can see my bookmark here. It's still there at that part of when my pathology is written inside the book for me. And that's because I got through part of it and I went, oh my God, I'm going to have to go back. Like it was really, really for me. And I read a lot of books about a lot of stuff. And that even for me made me go, whew, I'm going to come back to that.
Right. And that's what he's trying to make the reader uncomfortable and look at themselves like, why do you like this? This is bad. This is gross, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, just like the other where he put it in his paper, it's like you're supposed to be bored by this, and now this is like you're supposed to feel gross, but people are still, and it just makes him mad that people think it's good.
And then for him to have won an award with this alter ego that he's created in order to write this book, My Pathology, he writes it under a different name, a different pen name, and it goes on to win a literary award, given that he's been a writer his whole career, and none of his works to this point have ever received this sort of accolade. And then suddenly he writes something that he considers to be disingenuous, and it wins this big, massive literary award. And that's a lot of what the book talks about, and people being fascinated by a culture that they know nothing about. And they just, you know, sort of romance experiences that they've never had before, which I think was a really interesting theme. But I did want to talk about the structure of this book. So we've already said that it's a novel inside of a novel.
Wait, can I do one thing about my pathology before we move on?
Yes.
Is I just I noticed some like parallels between the book within the book and his life.
Okay.
Like it obviously starts with like his mom, and I think it starts with a dream where he like kills his mom. And like at the with what Monk's going through in his life, like you could see how he maybe would want something bad to happen to his mom like that. And then he says constantly, I love my mama, I hate my mama, I love my mama, I hate my mama. And that's like Monk. Then there's like the guy who says he's his dad and he's like not there and he doesn't know him. That's the same. And then like the rich girl and her boyfriend. That one's like kind of like the publishing industry.
Oh yeah.
You know, they like want to help. They want to help the Black community, but they want to do it in their own way, like while looking down on it in a way.
Right.
And then this was like the last one I came up with. It's like at the end of My Pathology, he's on TV and he's just happy that he's on TV, even though he's about to get arrested or something like that. But that's like Monk, even, and maybe it's like foreshadowing, but even though he wrote this thing he never wanted to write and never wanted to be successful, like he's finally getting the recognition that he thinks he deserves.
Well, he had no problem taking the money for the publishing rights.
Right.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, he went along with everything, right? Like, even though he would kind of act angry over it all, yeah, he took the money for the publishing rights. He met with the Hollywood director about the adaptation. He was right there at the book awards. Like, that's the thing, is he definitely was actually, you know, John, I think there was a lot of traces of guilt in there as well for him, just because he probably felt guilty about the fact that he was taking that money, that he was doing things, you know. So
it's sort of an oxymoron, right? Because talking about how the novel is trash and he doesn't give it any merit and it's not worth anything, but he has no problem,
right,
accepting, you know, the accolades. Like I was, And I think you're right. It's kind of like towards the end of the book when the book's about to win an award and it's been shortlisted to win this award, and he's a judge on the panel for, the judiciary committee, and he still doesn't say anything. He still allows the charade to continue.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that part was really interesting. I do want to, we have to talk about the structure of this book. We've talked about there being a novel inside of a novel. We've
Right.
talked about how Monk, I keep calling him Polonius. That's his that's his legal name, his government string, but
Right.
everybody calls him Monk. However, so we did talk about how he was asked to read one of his papers, and the whole paper printed in full is written inside the book. But the way that Percival Everett writes his books, somebody, when I was reading some of the reviews, referred to them as like commercial breaks. So you're reading a passage in the chapter, and then suddenly it scurries off to a pop culture reference, a literary reference, something totally askew. And it goes on, and you kind of like, where did that come from? Why am I reading this? And how come it's in the middle of this passage? And I thought that to be a little bit jarring. That was a little hard to get used to as I was starting to read the book.
Yeah, that the first short story, I believe, or one of the first short stories was the story about the woman who gives birth to an egg, and they have no idea how she gave birth to an egg, but they get to sit on the egg and all that, and she ends up taking the egg home and loving the egg as if it's a baby, and her husband leaves her, and then one day the egg cracks, and that's when the story ends. And I'm like, I could have read more of that actually. So I thought it was a very interesting setup to the book, and I would initially, stop and read each one and maybe even reread it a bit and look for some kind of deeper meaning tied into the book. And I'm sure a lot of them probably did have, but then I just kind of started taking them at face value and enjoying each kind of aspect as it came along. But it was unique and not something I've seen before, and I really liked that, actually. I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to almost read it again with the cliff notes on some of those, because I know that they are, like, some of them are literary references that I'm just not getting, or I don't know who, there's like a lot of conversation pieces, and I'm just like, I don't know that last name off the top of my head, and I'm like, I bet this means something, but I do remember one, it's like two German painters talking, and they're like happy that the Nazis did burn their art. They're like, wouldn't it be worse if they liked it? Which kind of fits the story well, I think.
Yeah, so it was, you know what I'm going to do for everybody who's watching this and not just simply listening to us. I just want to show a page real quick so you get sort of the idea as to what I'm talking about in terms of the passages. You can see that they're denoted. I don't know if you can see that on my camera or not. However, they're denoted with X's in between the passages. There they is. So it'll be like a passage of text, and then it'll be separated by these X's in between to showcase that we're into a separate thought or a separate section. And we might go back to the original passage, but we might not. And the chapters might be a page and a half. They could be 15 pages long. Percival Everett has no restrictiveness in the way that he has structured this book. It is written as though he is Thelonious, and this is how Thelonious thinks, and this is what's going on in his life at this specific time. It follows no necessary structure. Does that make sense? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think one thing, I was just going to say, Vince, when you said that about the cliff notes, one thing too is if you're going back and doing it, I believe you should read The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, because that was a big influence on this book. And I think there's so many things from that book that you would notice more, and it gives you that extra appreciation if you read it. I'm saying that as someone who hasn't read The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, but the main character was half named off Ellison, and just from what I read, if you're going back to reread this for all those extra things, read The Invisible Man first.
Yeah, I actually read that in high school, and but that was a long time ago. So
Yeah, it's lost on you now. That kind of, yeah.
I've been starting to do this. I've been starting to go back to things that I was assigned in high school and rereading them now as an adult. So I've read Wuthering Heights, I've read To Kill a Mockingbird, and the appreciation that I have of these books now, I wish I'd gotten them, but I'm glad that I'm rereading them, if that makes sense. But I'm going to have to do that with Erasure, because it was one of those books that after I read it and I went, there's got to be so much more to this book that I'm going to find the second go round.
yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
definitely.
There's a lot happening, and there's a lot happening underneath the surface. Another book that I just saw just doing some reading is Richard Wright's Native Son. That's like a famous piece of Black literature. And a lot of the story beats from My Pathology match up with that.
Oh.
So he almost is like parroting that
Interesting.
and parroting another book, which I guess I'll talk about now. He's parroting Push by Sapphire. Do you remember that? It became the movie Precious based on the novel
right.
by
Yes,
Sapphire.
yes.
That's a very brutal story as well. A lot of really nasty things happen. I haven't read it for that reason. But that book came out in 1996. And then I looked, I'm just curious, what was Percival Everett doing in 1996? He wrote a book called Watershed, which was about a hydrologist gets involved with a Native American woman. And then there's like a fight for the tribe's rights, which he sees parallels to the civil rights movement. And that book kind of got like more middling reviews, and Push was getting 5-star reviews,
Huh.
5-star reviews, considered one of the best books of the
Interesting.
year. And I don't know if that's exactly what was going on here, but it's kind of curious, a little curious.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. And I love that you did that. I love that you went back to see what was going on in Percival Everett's career at the time. Wow, that's really interesting, actually.
Yeah.
That's actually very smart, because I was wondering about a similar thing in regards to it, but I was just looking at books published like 2 years prior to Erasure, and to see if there was any, stereotypical thing there that was really that was who it was based on. I couldn't find anything, so that makes a lot of sense. That that's what it is. You went back, and yeah, that's a good find. That.
Yeah, I mean, I've never read Push. It does have great reviews, but it is, it does kind of fit like what he's raging against, I would say.
Right.
Like a lot of like very broken grammar and things like that in the writing.
Right, the language that's being
supposed to
used.
be realism and just nasty things happening, and I don't know. It's interesting.
So Graham, you and I are very similar humans when it comes to reading a book. After we're done reading it, we have to find out what everybody thinks about that book. Did you come across any interesting reviews about the book that you wanted to share?
I've read some posts on Reddit where they wrote so many words I did not understand. They were really big words by academics, because that's the thing. This book is when undergone a lot of academic analysis and all that. It's it's part of study material in some universities and things like that. And so I ended up stumbling upon, I just wanted some general opinions. I stumbled upon some real academics going deep into this book, and I could not comprehend a lot of it. But it is very interesting to see that different take on it, basically. Now I will probably just take those posts, throw them into Chat GPT, be like, explain this like I'm 5 years old. But it was really cool kind of seeing those different takes on it, from, because I thought a lot of discussion about the race angle and stuff, but it was actually just so much more to it. And it is one of those books it's very interesting to see that type of discussion about.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Vince? Anything that you read in terms of reviews about the book?
Not particularly. Like Graham said earlier, like the comparisons to Invisible Man and other like major works by Black authors. But it is, I don't know, it does seem, and it could just be projection, but it does seem like a very personal novel in a way.
Yeah.
Because he is a professor, you know, Percival Everett's a professor, the character's a professor.
They both
Some
write novels.
misunderstood works in his career,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Right.
The
Okay,
thing
guys.
is,
Well, what
sorry,
we're gonna do? Go ahead, Graham.
I
Go.
was just going to say, the thing is, that despite it's very interesting because despite the whole what's it, the academic analysis and all that, and Everett is a professor, the one thing I didn't expect out of this book was how funny it was. Like from the overarching storyline, of course, of this person who writes this novel to that, but just there was so many smaller humanist moments in the book. For example, he kept every time he would call. It was sometimes a dark humor, sometimes it was just laugh out loud humor. It was well, every time he would call his brother Bill after Bill had came out of the closet to his wife, and that I noticed that he would call him every other month, and every month Bill would reference a different guy he was with and stuff like that. Like it would just be a little name change, like oh Claude's here, I gotta go, or the next time he called it was Andrew's coming over tonight. You know, it was just things like that, and then like I said, and it was the one that I really liked was just in its way Percival Everett writes is the early scene in the diner where there's a two Frenchmen and the Hicks are starting to give him abuse. The way Percival writes that, you picture those Frenchmen as these tiny little thin small Frenchmen with a beret and a little mustache, and striped shirts, and you don't picture it. And then they stand up and they're 6'8", and they're a couple of Jacques Reachers, and it's like it's great. And he had so much of that humor throughout the book. Like I found it, like I said, despite the subject matter and everything, I thought it was a very funny book. And I don't read a lot of books that have good humor in them or like any attempt at humor, and I thought he delivered in spades with that. It was fantastic.
I mean, could you not hear Lorraine and Maynard yelling at one another on their wedding day?
Oh, that was such a great slapstick style
That's
scene.
a funny
right?
scene too, yeah.
And then his mother in the bathroom with the pantyhose down and stuff like that. Like and that's the thing. It's all a tragic situation, but it was funny. It was like that was one thing that stood out to me. It was a very funny book.
All right, gentlemen, we're gonna rate this out of 10 bells. Go ahead, Graham. How many bells out of bells?
I've been between 8 and 9. I'll say 9. Loses 1 bell for me, kind of because that whole narrator confusion, where maybe that was intended, but it did kind of throw me off a bit, and also the fact that his entire paper was written out that I know we all skipped because it was like, come on. I mean, maybe there's some deeper meaning to that, but no, but yeah, 9 out of 10, superb book. And best compliment I can give is I'm ready to read more Percival Everett as soon as I was done that one. So can't beat that.
All right, Vince, for yourself?
Yeah, I'm a tough rater, but I was between 7 and 8, and I ultimately went with 8. I do think it's 8 bells. It's just a lot. It gives you a lot to think about. Like, that's my favorite thing is when I close a book and then I think like, well, what, what's this? What's that? And I'm still coming up with stuff that I think about it even now. And I'll probably have to reread it in a couple months just to, see how I feel then. Because it just gives you a lot to chew on, and it gives you a lot to just think about. Like when I was growing up, I loved those movies like Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society, and like I was part of the problem, So
yeah, and having it like thrown in your face and shown to you like a mirror. That's really what this book does, right? So I'm gonna go with a 10. I'm gonna go with a 10 bell on this, and I'll tell you why. Because when I read a book, if the book says to me, I'm gonna have to read that again, that to me is the sound great book. It's not even just because the content was so great or whatever. It was something that had me thinking, that went, put it down, but you're going to need to revisit that one because you didn't get it all the way through, or you missed this part, or there's more to see, or there's more to come. So I have to give that a 10 because I know it's going to be like those other classics I picked back up again all those years later. And that to me is the sign of an amazing book. One that says you have to reread me.
it definitely is one I could reread. And I know this weekend I'm going to be watching the movie, the adaptation. I'm very excited for that now and see how that plays out. So.
American Fiction, right? And Vince, you watched it and you liked it?
There's great parts in it. I'll say.
Don't spoil the movie, just in case there's things
Right.
different. I don't like. I haven't seen it yet, so
We can spoil the book, but not the movie.
yeah, you can spoil the book, but not the movie.
Angela, who my cousin,
what do we think about? What is our bell rating on My Pathology?
Oh my! Considering I didn't finish it, I don't think I'm allowed to rate it.
Yeah.
Well, 12 out of 10.
Yeah.
It was
a solid 5.
5.
But it gains a bell when it changes the title to fuck. So
yeah.
So my cousin Angela, who typically joins us on this podcast, will not be with us for our next podcast either. She is in France right now. So Vince, you are cordially invited to join us once again next month for our next edition of I Care About Books. And of course, to all of the book notification readers who, are so wonderful that listen to the podcast, we invite you to email us and let us know your thoughts about this book or any others that you may want to suggest. Now, that all being said, gentlemen, Angela has given us our next challenge. I'll be interested to see if either of you have read this book. She would like us to read The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. Kingsolver?
I'm pretty sure I know what that is.
Do we know what that is?
But
I believe it's some romantasy.
Is it?
I believe it is.
Okay, so the overview very quickly. The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver is a best-selling novel about a missionary family, the Prices, who in 1959 moved from the U.S. state of Georgia to the village of Kailinga in the Congo.
Okay, I was thinking of a different author.
Yeah,
How much romance did you find in that, Vince?
Yeah. I was thinking of a different author.
The Poisonwood Bible. And if you are following along with our podcast, be sure to pick that book up and read it and then come back and give us your thoughts. You can email me at care@booknotification.com. And of course, when you are bopping around booknotification.com, you want to sign up, subscribe, check out all of the podcasts, including Vince's, which we publish. What do we publish that? Every Monday? Every Monday we've got a new podcast from you.
Saturday, or usually every Saturday.
Every Saturday.
When it goes up on Spotify, YouTube, and then we promote it on social Monday.
Yeah.
I believe. We have so much going on, it's hard to keep track.
That is an investment.
Yeah.
So thank you to both of you. Again, Erasure, Percival Everett, fabulous novel. Graham, how many bells?
9.
Vince, how many bells?
I did 8. And just so you know, there's an author named B.R. Kingsolver who writes romantasy. So I wasn't that far.
There we go.
And I'm giving the book 10 bells out of 10. We want to know how you feel about it. So make sure you head on over to booknotification.com, sign up, subscribe, get notified. And of course, let us know all your thoughts and maybe recommendations of the next book that we should review. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much,
you.
Pierre. Great job. Appreciate it.